All right, so let's look at another way of finding our zeros algebraically. This way will always work. It just takes more effort to do, but it will always work. So the deal with this one is that you want to make sure that your equation is in standard form. So if somebody gives you something like x squared plus 7x equals -6, then you need to add that 6 over to the other side so that it's equal to 0. Right? So you need everything on one side in order to use this process. And you want to get it into this form. So if it had been factored, you'd want to FOIL it and distribute everything out and combine like terms. But once you've done that, your next step then is to identify A, B, and C. And you want to make sure that you bring along any signs that are with them. So for example, on number 11, the A goes with the x squared. So that means my A is equal to 2. The B goes with the x, so here my B is 9. And then the C is the constant that's left over that doesn't have any x's, and that is going to be a -18. Okay, so that's where the example of where that sign comes along. And then once you've identified A, B, and C, you can use the quadratic formula. So quadratic formula is x is equal to -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, so it's all under that square root sign. And then you're going to take this entire thing and you're going to divide it by 2a. Okay. If you haven't seen this plus or minus sign before, we will do that in these problems so you'll get a sense of how that works out. All right, so number 11, we've already identified a, b, and c, so we're ready to plug it into this formula. I have x is equal to -b, so that's a -9. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, so I need 9 squared, minus 4a and c. And all of that is over 2a. All right, so I'm going to simplify this down a little bit. I want to figure out what's inside of this square root sign here. Let's simplify that. So I'm going to start by finding the part that's inside. So I have 9 squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is -18. Oops, must have done something wrong there. Oh, yep, I see what I did. It's 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times -18. Messed up those parentheses. There we go. And then I'm going to take the square root of that. So I hit the square root button. And if you haven't seen this before, you can actually get it to give you the answer you just got by hitting the second key. And then here it says answer. So I'm going to push that. And that tells you that square root is 15. Right, so I have -9 plus or minus 15 divided by 4. And now let's talk about this plus or minus part. So we're actually going to do 2 calculations here. One of those is going to be -9 plus 15 over 4. And the other one is -9 minus 15 over 4. You do want to put that numerator in parentheses so that your calculator gets that all in there correctly. So I have -9 plus 15 divided by 4. So 1.5 and -9 minus 15 in parentheses divided by 4 gives me a -6. So these are my two zeros, 1.5 and -6. All right, so I'd like you to go ahead and try 12 and 13 on your own. So pause the video, give those two a try, and leave number 14. We'll do number 14 together. All right, so hopefully you gave those a try. And while you had that video paused, trying those out, I got the next 3 set up. So I have A is 8, B is -25, and C equals 3. And I filled that into my quadratic formula. You just got to be really careful with these signs. So this -b is the negative of -25, which makes it a positive 25. And here, when we square that b, you want to put that -25 in parentheses to square it. So let's see what we're going to get out of that square root part. So I'll take my negative 25 in parentheses and square it, minus 4 times a times c gives me 529, and I'll go get that square root out of there. Okay, so that gives me 23. So what I have here is 25 plus 23 over 16, and 25 minus 23 over 16. And just remember, we want to put that numerator in parentheses on the calculator. So I have 25 plus 23 divided by 16. So that gives me 3. And then if I don't want to type this whole thing again, I'll hit the second key, and instead of pushing the one for answer, I'm going to push the one for entry. So it'll give me exactly what I typed on the previous line. And then I can go back and change this plus sign to a minus. And I'll hit enter. So that gives me my other value, 0.125. Okay. And let's see. So for 13, I have A is 3, B is 10, and C is negative 8. I filled that into my quadratic formula. And I get negative, let's figure out what's under the square root here. So I have 10 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 8. Get 196, and I'll do the square root of that. So that gives me 14. So I have negative 10 plus or minus 14 over 6. Okay, so two answers out of this. I have negative 10 plus 14 over 6 and negative 10 minus 14 over 6. So I put that in the calculator, put those parentheses around the numerator. That gives me about 0.67 or 2/3. Then again, if I don't want to retype that whole thing, I'll hit the second key and this one for entry. And then I'll just go back and swap that plus sign with a minus. Oops, minus, there we go. And I can see my other answer is negative 4. All right. So hopefully we're rocking and rolling. On a test or on your homework, I would expect you to identify A, B, and C and to put it all in here into this equation. And then I'm fine if these are the next steps you show. You don't have to show all of the steps in between. This is a nice step to show just in terms of being able to keep everything right, correct and straightened out in terms of what goes where. But you can always skip this step and jump straight to those as well. All right, last problem on here. So A is negative 2, B is 3, C is negative 24. So I filled this in. And I want to look at what happens when we look at that part in the square root. So I have 3 squared minus 4 times a negative 2 times a negative 24. That gives me a negative number. So I have the square root of negative 183. And unfortunately, we can't find that in the real numbers. We can only take square roots of 0 or positive things if we want a real answer. So in this case, there are no real zeros. Okay, and what that means picture-wise is that if I draw a graph, that means that my parabola is entirely above the x-axis. Okay, so it never crosses through the x-axis, and that's why there's no real zeros. And if you tried to get your calculator to do this for you, your calculator is probably going to be an unhappy camper. Yeah, it says non-real answer. In other words, there's no real zeros here. All right, so I talked about what steps I expect you to show here. I do want to show you an applet that you can at least double check your work on. So let's take a look at, we'll put in these ones from number 11. So our answers were 1.5 and negative 6. So you can use this app to double check your homework and things like that. Make sure that you've carried out those calculations correctly. So let me switch to that. All right, so here is the app that I put a link to. There's a number of free apps online. If you Google like free quadratic formula calculator, you should be able to find something. But I like this one because it makes you identify A, B, and C, which is a really important skill. So from number 11, we had A was 2, B was 9, and our C was negative 18. And we hit calculate. Hopefully we're going to get the same thing we got. So our answers were 1.5 and negative 6, which is the same thing they have here. But this looks nice. They actually show you all of the steps along the way as well. Okay. All right. So hopefully that will help you out with everything.